In the triangle above, the sine of x is 0.6. What is the cosine of angle y? Alright, so there's two ways you can solve this. One is, if you're lucky enough to have remembered what the relationship between the sine of x and the sine of y are, which is what we call the complementary angle relationship between sine and cosine. And if you remember that, you'd know that the sine of x is equal to the cosine of y. So if you remember this, like, you're in luck, because literally all it is 0.6 is equal to, well, 0.6. So the cosine of y is 0.6. That's it. Yes, I know. It's crazy, but if you remember this, this is a relationship that sine of x is equal to cosine of y, and they're asking you, well, sine of x is 0.6, so what is the cosine of y? Couldn't have been more straightforward. But let's assume for the vast majority of us who probably have this slipped out of our minds and don't really know this, what are you going to do if you have this on the test? Shouldn't panic. What you should do is just start thinking about what is sine really a measure of and what is cosine really a measure of. So sine is sine of x, and we know that sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So which is the opposite side of this x? It is this one, and the hypotenuse is this side, right? So the sine of the opposite over the hypotenuse, that ratio is equal to 0.6, the sine of that. Okay? Now let's think about the cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So let's write out the hypotenuse first. Now what is the adjacent? So it's the adjacent side to that y. And the adjacent side to that y just happens to be this side, which was the opposite for the x. So if we continue with our naming scheme here, the adjacent side to the y will just be that o. Okay? And what do you know? Cosine of o over h is the same as the sine of o over h, which will give us 0.6. Okay? If you're a little confused, pause this video and try to work this out again. Just think about, if we're saying the sine of this x, the sine of the angle x, what sides are we talking about? And if we're talking about the cosine of y, what sides are we talking about? And if you work it out, you'll actually see that the ratios of both the sine of x and the cosine of y are both the same, and hence 0.6.